Welcome everyone to Nerd of the Rings. We have a very special guest with us today, my friend Jerry VanderStelt. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be on and an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, guys, for those of you who I saw some confusion in the live stream. So what we're revealing today is a new piece of Jerry's artwork. And you guys, if you've watched any number of my videos, you've definitely seen his work, and you've probably seen it in other places as well. So just to bring up a couple ones that you're probably familiar with, the amazing Balrog in Moria. And Jerry, we'll probably discuss some of these previous pieces as we get later into the stream. Rivendell, no doubt, one of the most commonly seen, I think, is your Rivendell piece that I absolutely love. And another area that you excel is Star Wars art. And so if you've been on our Nerd Strike Back channel, you've definitely seen some pieces in our Luke Skywalker video. And most recently, I used this piece as part of the thumbnail for our Yoda Origins video as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's great stuff. I've been a fan of Jerry's for a long time, and we got to meet each other in person for the first time at Comic-Con this past year. And so today we're here to talk about your latest piece that you worked with the great folks at Wētā Workshop on.
That's right. Yeah. We did a collaboration together when they first kind of made it known to me that they were going to do a very large sculpt of Smaug. And from one thing led to another, and I was in the middle of projects with them already, and then they kind of talked about a collab. So, yeah.
Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and Jerry, can you show us there in person what you've been working on, and then I'll pull up the digital.
All right, let's see. Here we go. That's the original, way back there. It's pretty big. It's it's like 36 by 48 inches or something.
Oh, wow.
And I had to paint it that big because of the Smaug's tiny little head, so there was room to put in details. Barely. It was the tiniest brushes you can imagine. But yeah, man, there it is.
I love it. I got to see this early, guys, so I got all my, initial freakouts out of the way, but still, like, looking at it live here, this piece is so amazing. Jerry, I love the detail that you put into these things, and we've got it here digitally, guys, so I can bring it up and we can talk about some of the detail that you put into this. First of all, I think a question a lot of people would have is how long did this take, Jerry? Because as we see, if I cycle through some of the images, there is an insane amount of detail work.
Insane is right. The short answer is forever. I mean, just paint time alone had to be probably not short of 10 plus weeks.
Wow.
And when I say week, that's not 40 hours. That's like 6 days a week, 10 to 12 to sometimes 14 hours. Time flies, though. The passion's driving you. But no, there's a lot of time. And I probably spent as much time in the prep as the actual execution, painting it analog. So I did that to myself, but I had a vision for what I wanted. And I knew what I was getting into to a degree. But you kind of forget how much was involved until you actually sign it at the bottom and say, wow, I just went through this odyssey to get from A to B, but I'm glad it's done. Now, always nice to finish and go to something else.
Yeah, right, man. So so here we included this image so that you guys could see the scale, comparing this to the tip of a pencil, and you can see how much finer the detail is than the tip of a pencil. And Jerry, you told me that you had to use the smallest available paintbrush, correct?
That's correct. I think that's a 0/10 or even smaller. And the problem is acrylics. I love them because they dry so fast, so you can keep layering. You don't have to wait like oil. I love oil and oil painters, but I don't have that kind of patience, especially with something that takes this long. So the problem with acrylic is because it dries so fast, you have a very fine tip for maybe a week. And then
Mm.
you basically got to throw it in the junk drawer and then get another one out. So you blow through the detail brushes, especially with the hyper insanity of all the scales.
Yeah.
And the
Now
eye.
I was just zooming in on the eye because you look at the size comparison of a pencil
Mm,
tip to the
mm,
eye and how many different colors are at play. I'm just
yes.
now noticing within the eye itself, such a small piece compared to the overall piece.
Well, what I did is I tried to prepare myself by asking a few questions. So a good friend of mine at Wētā Workshop, Jules German, who is involved in painting a lot of the prototypes for the collectibles, said, "Oh, mate, you got to get these pair of glasses, and you put this lens down, and it's got all these different, different power zoom options." And so I ended up using the second to the largest zoom. Well, it kind of makes you a little bit dizzy as you're painting, but if you don't move too much, you can actually see what you're doing. And then you realize just how big the tip of that brush is. It's way too large for what you're trying to do.
Wow.
And people might think, well, why go through that detail? It's so small. But what I've found over the years is some of the tiniest details the human eye can still pick up on.
Mm.
So, let's say you take a painting as large as this one and shrink it down to the smallest paper option on this will be an 18 by 24.
Yeah.
You still can pick up the tiny little nuances in there. So what you do in the real world will still translate into the print. So, all that work is not for nothing. It will carry into the smallest print. So I've learned that over time. A lot more work, but worth it because you want, the people to be able to see those little things if they look.
Wow. And folks, I did bring it up on the lower third there, but just drawing attention to it, we've got the link to Jerry's store, and he was kind enough to give a 15% off discount code for my viewers here that are seeing this for the very first time today. So check out Jerry's store. I'm sure you'll find stuff that you really really like, but use the code smaugnerd, all one word, lowercase, and that'll save you 15% off. Um,
I believe that's
so
good through Sunday.
good through Sunday. There we go. That's
Mhm.
good to know. I didn't think to ask that. Um, gosh, yeah, I'm amazed at the detail. And Jerry, you were talking to me before we started recording how you work some things into this, like Smaug's talon here, kind
Mhm.
of adding insult to injury by scratching up the great dwarven statue.
Yeah, both claws actually are that's something Smog would do.
Yeah.
His attitude towards them, whether he realizes it or not. Maybe he's thinking of Thorin or somebody else, and he's about to crack it or whatever. But I just thought it was a fun little detail to add that maybe people would find. But now I've blown it; they already know it. So,
Now they know. Yeah.
but now they know. But
Now,
yeah, the scales were probably the most time consuming.
mm,
And obviously, working with Weta, I had a little bit of inside info, so I had some reference shots. And
ah,
the burden is a delightful one, but the burden is to try to stay as close to what's represented on film
yep.
in a whole nother angle, point of view that maybe has never been seen in the film. But so you have to translate that from what you see on film or reference into the art to try to be as accurate as you can. Um, just because I feel it deserves it. Smaug being such a known character in literary works that
Yeah.
I felt it deserved that attention.
Now, we saw this. What you kind of alluded to, showing. Um, I think it's a really cool approach that you take in so many of these pieces that you do, taking characters and their what they look like in the Peter Jackson world in his adaptations, but showing us different scenes or different shots that don't appear in the film. So it's kind of it's something familiar but new at the same time. And for example, the Balrog piece that we showed earlier,
Mhm.
that is we never see Doran's Bane just walking around in Moria.
Right.
Though we know he did make his way in pursuit of the Fellowship, and you've kind of done that here with Smaug. And for those curious, so this is the statue that Wētā made recently, and so this is kind of the piece that you are working in conjunction with. So
Correct.
um, not only were they, coming up with something fresh that wasn't in the films, but then you were coming up with something that played off of this, but it's a different pose, as we can see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about what's your thought process and decision making process as far as making these things slightly different. What kind of things do you look for?
Well, when you're collabing with somebody like Wētā, and I was working closely with Daniel Faulkner,
Hmm.
sweetheart of a guy, easy to work with, but he's very wise in Middle Earth lore and the perspectives and points of view that to try to go for. Is that after a few design ideas were tossed back and forth and fleshed out, we began to realize it would benefit each of these to slightly vary them in pose, yet we have a similar anchor point, the gates of Erebor, more
Mm,
specifically the dwarven statue.
yeah.
And so once they kind of were starting to lean the direction that they were thinking for the sculpt, then I decided to veer from that just a little bit. But then I thought it'd be interesting if the moment in time is maybe just minutes or just seconds even prior to Smaug launching to go and take flight, head to Lake Town, for example.
Yeah.
So they kind of play off each other, but they each offer a different point of view to enjoy, yet they're in the same location. So, you're trying to think of ways people would maybe enjoy them in 2D and 3D or vice versa.
Yeah.
And there could have been, 100 different ways to cut this. You have to land on one eventually. I
Right.
mean, you could work it to death and you never come up with anything. But yeah,
So
I was going to
yeah.
say I love the way that Wētā basically come up with the wings just totally spread out, which is not something you normally see, and you get to see how vast the wings are,
Yeah.
and just the scale is so. I think they when they first started designing him, they compared his wingspan to greater than that of a 747.
Yes. I think it was
Yeah.
two
Hmm.
stand side by side, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, that
I
wide.
think. Yeah.
And I think from the back of his jaw to the tip of his nose, his head's the size of a Greyhound bus.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that's like massive.
Yeah. Absolutely. So tell us about, you mentioned how long it took you actually working on this. Um, Tell us a bit about your pre-process. So you mentioned like the planning process
Yeah.
can be extensive as well. So what does that consist of?
Well, the first step is once we have an agreement to pursue a collaboration like this, I have to bring to the table kind of my own conceptual ideas of how I envision this, not only as an art print, but as something that reflects an existing or going to be existing a 3D sculpt, so that they're cross-pollinating each other,
Mm,
so to speak. So I basically do a bunch of rough thumbnails for myself. Basically, nobody can interpret what they are. They're so messy.
mm.
Um, Child drawings, just quick little line art, which I wouldn't show many people, just to try to work out some kinks in my mind. And then I'll go through all the references that exist out there. And as I try to lean toward a photorealistic approach in my art, I try to go through all my archives of rocks, trees, cliffs, anything in my Wētā folder, from The Hobbit, maybe do some film pulls to get
Mhm.
a little bit of accuracy as far as being consistent. And then once I compile that, then I look and say, okay, what is it that I don't have in my reference, photorealistic reference, that I've got to build? And
Mm.
that's where
Yeah.
the time starts to just eat into this. So a lot of times I'll employ a program called ZBrush and Maya
Mhm.
and mix that in with digital formats. And then
Yeah.
ultimately I end up painting this in analog, old school. And the reason for that is because Digital can be a beautiful medium and you can do a lot of tricks with it, but there's a certain nuance and just subtleties in when you do it by hand that have a little bit of grit, and it feels more fitting for something like Middle Earth,
Yeah.
gritty and old world feeling. And so that last step is the longest step. So basically, it's basically a really fancy guide.
Mm.
And it's always most likely the case when I go after pieces like this, I always run into this problem that what I have in my head, there's no reference on film
Yeah.
or a still. Now, sometimes in your archives, you'll get lucky and have a photographer that did a behind the scenes. I got a bunch of behind the scenes shots, which are entertaining to go through. It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting, a little story behind there. But sometimes you'll run into these little treasures and you'll say, oh, I can use that. And it's never been seen in that angle. But
Yeah.
that's far and few between. Most of the time you have to build it by either compiling 2D or
Mhm.
3D or a mixture of both. I have a project that's kind of waiting in the wings that I had to mix 2D and 3D photography and some photography my daughter actually took on one of our trips to New Zealand. And so you're intermixing it. So by the time you're done, I even forgot where the photography left off and the digital took over, the 3D.
Yeah.
And that it kind of convinced myself that it worked. And that's just for building a reference. Then you still got to paint it. But accuracy as far as light and shadow, depth of field, that's what I go for. So that's the
Wow.
long, crazy process from A to B, or A to Z, I should say.
And Higgy just pointed out in the chat here the smoke from the fires, which I hadn't even noticed on my first, glance. And I've looked at this a handful of times since you sent it to me yesterday. And um, yeah, I didn't even notice the things like the smoke. I was sitting here looking at the trees, wondering how many hours you must have put into making trees.
My wife
Um,
could answer that. Late for dinner, I don't know how many times, because you get into it and you forget where you are and you're in that world. The
yeah.
easel is sort of your window to it. But I'm kind of glad that you didn't notice the smoke, because I try to make that a subtle thing that you maybe notice second, third round.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
And photoreal, you have to give a little bit uh, of reality away for the good of the piece. I mean,
Mm,
technically, with that much heat and all the water from the waterfalls, you'd have steam. And so
yeah.
half of the piece would be probably covered in steam. So, you have to figure out what's aesthetically pleasing, but accurate as well. So you got to
Yeah.
try to balance that a little bit.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
yeah, Feanor just pointed out, we even get you can see some of the reflection on the mountainside, obviously, but the water of the flame, you get that a bit
yeah.
of that
hmm
orange in there.
hmm
I'm curious when it comes to the trees, painting the ones that are on fire, do you paint them normal trees first and then add the fire, or
Yeah.
what's
hmm
you do? Okay.
It's a longer process, but if you find that along the way you've actually lit this thing up too much, you
Uh-huh.
can. Well, one of my processes is, let's say I'll paint one of these trees in its full light if there was no fire there, the way the normal ambience of the area would be with natural colors,
Mhm.
and then I'll lock it in with a clear coat to protect. It's almost like a real world digital layer in Photoshop, say.
Yeah.
So you have
Okay.
this little clear coat, and so then you go and you can be brave because you have that layer protected. And if you
Ah.
add a little too much, and there's a lot of push and pull back and forth to get the right amount of fire, and then if you have a little too much, you can always erase it and try again. So
Wow.
it's not a whiz bang, magic wand. It's always push and pull, experiment, see if it feels right. And then what do you do with fire that's 40, 50 yards, 100 yards away, versus like on the bottom right corner? These are much closer trees.
Right.
You
Yeah.
have to try to treat them a little bit different. And then you have the ambience and the glow and bounced light. And yeah, it can be, you sometimes feel like you're a little bit of you're looking at it scientifically, trying to be accurate, and it can make
Right.
you nuts.
I bet. Yeah. Wow. And let's see here. Andrew had a good point here. Oh, Andrew, yeah, he said, "I'd love to see Jerry's take on the Charge of the Rohirrim," which makes me wonder, Jerry. Like, um, I'm sure you have a dozen different ideas in your mind at any given time, but
Yeah.
are there kind of dream projects that you have in mind that you would want that you wish to tackle someday?
Yes. I've got a to-do list, or a wish list, I should say.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish I could say them, but then it would blow the surprise if I actually pulled them
Ah,
off.
okay.
But almost all of these dream jobs would be, again, trying to tackle something that we know happened in the book and we know it happened in the film, yet was never in the film. That maybe
Yeah.
perhaps fell on the editing cutting room floor or something, that you picked up the pieces and said, let's grab this shot that was never seen and bring it to life in art.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those. And whenever I do projects like this, what I try to do is to say, the movie's so beautifully captured Middle Earth. The people at Wētā did, nobody could do it like them. And my job, I feel, is not to make that world smaller, but to try to make it larger. So
Mm,
to go beyond what we've seen,
yeah.
or just even like this one, moments before a known moment that you say,
Mhm.
what happened just before, or what's around that corner? I'm always intrigued by that, to make the world larger.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that as a fellow nerd, like everybody else that loves the Tolkien literary work. So that's always the approach I have. That makes it more difficult, but it's worth it because it's a passion I have.
Yeah. Now, Higgy says he wants to see your take of Tom Bombadil.
Interesting. Oh,
Um,
that's interesting. You know what? It seems like Tom Bombadil would fit into an epic mini
oh,
approach.
they should.
He would
They
fit
should
in
make
there.
one. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that would be wonderful if they did.
Well, like you had said when you had interviewed Richard, that you would love to see an animated series. I would love
I
to see that.
would. Yeah, that is my
That would be
dream
so cool.
project. If I could wave a wand and just
Oh.
will a project into being, into production, it would be a Lord of the Rings animated series in the style of mini epics. I would also accept a Hobbit animated series, but
Yeah.
I think yeah. So I think we might have to plant that seed with Richard and say, "Hey, Tom Bombadil mini epic." So,
Oh, I have a feeling he would be all gung ho for
oh,
it.
I bet he would.
And
Yeah.
you know, the funny thing about it is, you know, they're interesting the way they've been sculpted and the kind of the exaggerated approach. And
Hmm.
yet, if there was an animated series, I wouldn't be looking at it in a comic sense. I would be taking it very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it
Uh,
is. It is.
the format's just so interesting.
Yes, it is. And yeah, I think we've seen some great examples in the last few years actually
Hmm.
of animated tales that are not made with comedy or, directed at kids
Yeah.
per se. Like,
Hmm.
I think a lot of them, kids could watch. If you guys haven't seen like the Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, that came out recently, it's a very, very good, and kids could watch it, adults could watch it, and that's a huge strength of the medium, that I think a lot of people fail to realize or take for granted. But yeah, I won't get on um, that hill to die on as much as I sometimes do on the channel, because these good people have heard me talk about that
It's all
hypothetical
right. It's
project
a
a
great
lot.
idea.
But yeah, so when you are working on this, I know you've flattered me before by saying you have my videos playing in the background
Oh yeah,
sometimes,
I
but
do.
what other things besides Nerd of the Rings do you have that you listen to? Do you do any of the audiobooks or anything?
Oh yeah, I've listened to from the Silmarillion all the way through the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, and now what's the other one that recently came out on Audible? Oh, oh, come on, help me out.
Is
It's
it the Fall of Numenor that just came out?
no, it's oh, I'm going blank here, but it has the whole chapter of the quest for Erebor from the point of view
Oh,
of
Unfinished Tales.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So I listened to that and absorbed that.
Yeah.
Of course, Howard Shore. And
Yeah.
it's difficult for me actually to play anything that's not related to the
Yeah.
project because the ambience of the room inspires, that's the oil to the machine to keep going.
Yeah.
Uh, Star Wars would have no place, but Lord of the Rings wouldn't either if I'm working on Luke Skywalker or something.
Right.
So it has to be appropriate to. Now, of course, there's fantasy tracks from, let's say, video games. That kind of stuff will fit. So anything fantastical that'll, try to lift you. And, I need all the help I can get. So music is a huge boost to keeping yourself inspired. Because, to be honest, a project this long, there is a potential to lose, well, not interest, but you lose energy,
Yeah.
because they're so long.
It's a marathon. Yeah.
It's a marathon. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the music is a huge part of it. So Nerd of the Rings channel, there's a lot of good stuff in there too to fill that gap. So yes,
Yeah.
thank you for having that.
Oh,
Helps me.
thank you.
No
Now,
worries.
DField22 asks, how about Bear McCreary? Have you dove into his either Rings of Power, or he also has, God of War, among
Yep.
other things that I feel like would probably fit pretty well.
Yes.
He's got a lot of fantasy options.
Absolutely. The last, ever since Rings of Power came out, I got more introduced to his music, and he's also added to that list. So that was a good question. Perfectly fitting for that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, anything of that nature is a fit for me.
Now, I usually ask this to people on the front end, and again, folks, if you're tuning in late here, if you go to Jerry's store, we've got an exclusive discount code. You can save 15% off with the code smaugnerd, and one of my awesome moderators will drop that link in. It's also the pinned comment in the chat there, so make sure you visit that. Check out Jerry's store. Now, I usually ask this on the front end of streams, but since we were doing the reveal, I wanted to get to that right away. But Jerry, tell us how you were first introduced to Tolkien.
Well, taking the Wayback Machine, I have to give credit to my 7th grade English teacher, Mr. Blackburn. And Mr. Blackburn, if you happen to be watching by chance, thank you for reading The Hobbit to us. Never heard about J.R.R. Tolkien. Who is this? What is this? Hobbit, this is amazing. And he read the whole book, maybe a half a chapter, a chapter once a week. I think it was on Fridays, if I remember right, way back then. And it just blew my mind. Shortly thereafter, I heard that he was friends with another author called C.S. Lewis. Who's that? A friend of mine handed me the book, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I blew through that and I said, are there more? He said, yeah, there's 6 more. So I read those. And then after a little bit of time had gone by, I still didn't realize that there was 3 more, at least at that time, of from the same author, Tolkien. Yeah. So I couldn't quite understand what I was reading as well as, when you're much older. But when I read Fellowship for the first time, I was just completely blown away. And that's probably what prompted my love for the genre. So it started in school way back when. And as far as working with Wētā, that happened back in 99, summer of 99, Comic-Con. A lot of things happen at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So anybody can go. So I was way back against the south wall in the Artist Alley section. And I had heard, I think it was back when AOL was the only online, or was it? There was only a few out there that you could, stream things.
Yeah, they used to send you the discs for like 90 free hours of America Online.
Something like that, yeah. And
showing our age here a little bit.
Oh, well, I'm showing mine. But I had heard that they were going to do the movie, and I barely knew how to get online, but I discovered what actors were going to be in it. So I thought, let me kind of put together a composition like in a movie poster style and just do a quick little piece. Who knows? Maybe somebody from the production company will come along. So I had it behind me on an easel, And I was talking to a neighbor friend of ours, artist friend of mine, and his wife was chatting with me about something. And my wife kept elbowing me, and this gal was talking to me, so I wanted to wait till she was finished with what she was saying, and she kept elbowing me. And I finally looked over, and Elijah Wood's standing in front of me. And he pointed to the painting. He says, "That's me." And I says, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, wow. What are you doing here?" Well, he was 18 years old at the time. I think fairly unknown. He'd done a few other films like The Good Son and some others, but he
Flipper.
could,
Yeah.
yeah, he could walk the floor though.
Yeah.
And so I met him and we talked a little bit about it. And a minute or two later comes this real tall man with kind of round glasses with a very heavy New Zealand accent. And we all know that's Richard Taylor.
Yep.
And then behind him was a good buddy of mine, Gino Acevedo, who was Elijah's bodyguard. Yep. He's a big bear of a guy. And also the prosthetic lead. So he had been working on all the prosthetics.
So for those of you who remember our interview with John Rhys Davies, so Gino is the guy who helped John with the prank on Peter Jackson where he pretended his finger was cut off.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think there was a few other jokes they pulled as well.
I'm sure. Yeah.
If you interview Gino, you'll be able to ask him about those. But that kind of started there. And I thought, you know what? Let me just make a little simple 8x10 print of this just in case. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the very question Richard asked. He says, "Do you happen to have a print of this?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. Would you like to have it?" He says, "Yes." He says, "After Comic-Con, I'm going to go to New York City with a meeting I have with New Line." At the time, it wasn't Warner. It was the daughter company. "And let me see if they would like to take you on to do fine art with us." And I says, "Oh, wonderful. Lovely. What a blessing." A couple weeks later, I get an email from some gal at New Line and asked if I wanted to get involved. And I haven't looked back since. You know, Richard, Gino, Daniel, they've been friends of mine for the last 20 years. And I have to give all credit to them for helping me and taking interest in my desire to do it, because there's a lot of artists out there who also, like me, love this subject. So the blessing to have the opportunity to work so closely with these people, wonderful people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of interviewing both Daniel and Richard here on the channel, and they're so generous with their time, and they have some amazing stories as well.
They do. Such a passion.
Yeah. So obviously, this is your most recent piece. Before releasing this piece, what would you say is your favorite of your Middle Earth pieces that you've done? Aside from Smaug here, because obviously Smaug is, he's tyrannical and in a category of his own, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess if you could categorize it to what belongs in a man cave or, well, a woman's cave, is it living room friendly, or is it more for, down where the collectibles go? I don't know. They're all so different. I mean, like Rivendell doesn't compare to Bane of Durin, for example. I find that that's sort of a favorite generally with in the broadest sense with collectors. And I've had people that have bought Rivendell that don't even know about the movie. I've never read the books. Yeah, just for the landscape. So that's kind of interesting. But as far as my favorite, it might be the Fellowship of the Ring collage I had done. I think that was one of my first jobs I had done with them. Sort of encapsulates, pretty much all the main events of the film, all the main characters. I'd say probably because of the memories that went with it. Excited and, got in, and I was able to release a new piece. Choosing between your kids, I guess. They're all so different. I try to love them all enough to put the same amount of effort and love into it.
Yeah.
If I can.
And I love, so this, again, Rivendell here is a piece that, I've looked at, gosh, what feels like a million times. And you can still catch little details. And I don't know how long it took me to notice. I noticed long before today, don't worry, but that the fellowship,
I was going to say, shame on you.
No, but it's funny, like even when it's fully zoomed out, you get Gandalf's profile. Like there's no question in your mind who's in the front there, and like how easily you can, I mean, the hobbits, I couldn't tell you which one's Merry, which one's Pippin, but I know that, this is Frodo here and
Yeah,
Sam's back here with Bill.
that's right.
Um, and but you can tell Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, Aragorn. Like it's amazing uh how you're able to put detail in something so small.
There you go with that tiny, tiny brush again.
Yeah.
It's the only way to pull that off.
I think we
Um,
need a picture of you. You need to take a selfie of you with those glasses on and post on your Instagram or
okay,
something.
I should. Yeah, I'm sure Jules has done that too with what he does. I mean, like I said, he's the one that first told me about them. But on some of these nutty pieces of detail, you have to get those out. And this
Yeah.
one wasn't so bad, although it was very detailed with like the battle gear. It was large in scale so that it was still paintable. Whereas the figures on the bridge, that was like every little dot you put on there could change their whole face. So it was like,
Right.
yeah, kind of don't not too much coffee when you do that.
Now, tell us about Durin's Bane here as we go. I picked out a couple of my favorites so we could
Okay.
specifically talk. And I know we, at Comic-Con, we talked for a good long time at your booth there. So yeah, if you guys ever have the chance to go to Comic-Con, it's super cool and you never know who you'll run into. But that's how Jerry and I got talking more, and we talked about his artwork and everything there. Whoops, now we're back in Star Wars. There we go. So yeah, tell us a bit about Durin's Bane here.
Well, again, that was a piece that right away after seeing the film, I wanted to try to show an unseen part of Moria for how
Yeah.
vast that realm was. And, was the Balrog hibernating all along? We're not even sure what point in time this was. Might have
Yeah.
been before he hibernated. So the challenge was similar to Smaug, where how do I compile references so I can pull it off in a more realistic point of view, lighting, shadow, things like that. And so this piece was just to have fun with some of the known architecture. And that's what anchored us, that without question,
Sorry.
casual observers
There we go.
will know that that's Moria because of the architecture that was
Yep.
designed by Wētā. And so I wanted to make that pretty obvious. I thought it was fun to tell a little story with some of the stuff you find in the battle debris. There's all kinds of goodies in there.
Yeah.
I think there's even an elf warrior somewhere in there, if I remember right.
Oh, really?
Somewhere. I think right under his claw there. Oh, there's an elf shield I'm seeing. I actually forgot I'd
right
done
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, they did traffic with Moria. Maybe something happened in a skirmish that they helped them out. I mean, who knows? That's a little bit of toying with what if, but it's kind of fun to hide those. But one of the things I thought I'd have fun with on this piece was, I don't know if you can pick it out in the resolution of the shot you have, but
Yeah.
in the book, Gimli and Moria, when they took a break, had quoted the poem of Durin's Bane. And then Sam had made a comment about it.
The Song of Durin.
The Song of Durin. And that's actually almost all of the poem is etched in that little threshold that the Balrog's standing on. And I had to check the lettering to make sure it was actually correct. And the last line goes, "Till Durin wakes again from sleep."
Yeah.
I thought that would just be fun. And it was more for me. I didn't think anybody would find it. And some people have. So that's always.
Now we have at least, we have like 270 more people who know now that the Song of Durin is etched as a reference here in your piece.
And you would think
that's one of my favorite details, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I figured that's something dwarves would do. They were never shy about their heritage, and they were very proud. So it'd be probably something that was etched all over the place.
Yeah, especially among other dwarf. Yeah, like they might be private to outsiders, but they'd be very prideful within their own borders.
Yes,
such things. Yeah.
Being some of the smallest characters, they have some of the largest statues of themselves, which is always kind of funny.
That's true. Yeah.
But no, that was a lot of fun for the little detail. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo, piece where you got all this debris. But again, going back to Fellowship of the Ring, I loved the Moria sequence. That Wētā, again, just did such a beautiful job, attention to detail with all the different, debris that tells a story of what might have happened there. And, it'd be easy to just slap a couple pillars together, paint them, and maybe a chain or two. But I think it's just the subtle details that are, helpers in telling that little story, or just posing a question. I've often said it's not so much answering a question, but leaving people with a question, which keeps them interested. Like, what is that? It's kind of a midi-chlorian issue. You don't say, you just keep that quiet.
Yeah. Don't go too far. Yeah.
Keep it a mystery. You see the little pebbles there falling down?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just noticing some of the finer details in this. So, do you know how many scales Smaug has?
Gino told me once.
Really? So,
yeah.
like, you know the official answer from what I was just curious how many scales you painted. I doubt that you counted them.
Yeah. No. But I think in the actual model they built for it, I want to say it was like 15,000 plus.
Wow.
If I remember right. And I believe it, because, by the time you get down that tail all the way to the body, and I mean, even his wing fingers that are, on either side of the membranes, there's scales all the way to the tips of the claws at the top of his wings, and they're everywhere. So yeah, a bit daunting. And then of course you have to consider the light and shadow and the firelight, the ambient light, and all this involved. So
how, I'm curious, what of this whole piece with Smaug, going back to our reveal for today, what was the most challenging part of this?
Fire.
The fire. Okay.
Oh, the fire. The way it behaves is very tricky, and I don't have a grasp on it. It's like getting on a bucking bronco. You just hang on. It takes you. You're never sure what it's going to be. But I think fire itself was hard for me to. You would think it'd be Smaug. That's just tedious and time consuming. But like, for instance, you have one of those trees that's in mid fall. The way it behaves, fire that's, something's caught on fire, but it's falling. You have to consider the draft, the way the fire would be pulled in the opposite direction that's falling.
Yeah.
So the behavior of fire, the ambient light, the smoke. Fire was the hardest thing to try to get a handle on for me. Now, the dragon was the most fun, but just took a long time.
Yeah. So would you say, was Smaug the aspect of this that took the longest, or was it the fire that was it challenging and took the longest?
Smaug still took the longest to do, because I was trying to center all the attention on him and the details.
Yeah.
However, in a piece like this, if I'm obeying the rules of depth of field, for example, I would say he's 200-300 yards away if we were standing there, maybe more. Even like his far proper left wing is, if you'll notice, there's just a little bit of particles in the air between that wing and his neck. It's a little further away. So as much as you want to detail it, which I did, I took it all the way, locked it in my clear coat, that, like I said, with the trees.
Yeah. And
then you have to push it back. So you're kind of building and then knocking down what you did, but that detail is still in there.
Yeah.
That your eye will pick up ever so slightly. It's those little subtle nuances. And that's where the time just goes, because you're dancing between how far do I push to show the fun stuff, but yet in reality, it's not quite visible. And that you're always trying to find that balance.
Wow. That's an amazing detail that, until you pointed it out, I think, my eyes and my mind acknowledge it, because you can tell that there's a difference there.
Yes.
And like you said, the particles, just as, something that's farther away would have that, would be less sharp in that manner. But until you actually explained it, like, I couldn't tell you why, why it looked accurate. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing what the human eye will pick up on that's not right, even if they can't explain what it is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird the way the thought process have to go. when you're doing this, because you're thinking, okay, there's waterfalls near his proper left wing
Hmm.
or our right, and there's going to be water particles that are falling behind his neck, so that's going to obscure a little bit of the clarity.
Yeah.
So all these things come into play, and that's partly why, for example, a little touch on the very bottom right corner at the last minute, I felt I had to yet add another row of trees because there was no sense of depth between the closest tree to the bottom right, to establish that layering of depth as you go back and things start to
Ah,
lose detail. So I had three more trees, and then I thought, oh, let's make two of them like they're maybe one of the rolling stones hit them and they're in the mid fall. They're ready to fall down, which
yeah.
you can just almost hear the crackling. That's what I was trying to imagine, of stones hitting them and embers flying. So yeah, it's a lot of that push and pull again of working this out.
Yeah, I love, the details like the falling rocks. Something that, never would have crossed my mind to put in, but it makes all the sense in the world, and it gives some life, I guess, is,
A little action.
yeah, a little action to the piece, as if, a giant dragon breathing fire isn't enough action for you, you know. But it fits so well with, the effect that a giant creature like Smaug would have on this landscape.
Yeah, he would be loosening stones, but I believe it's also fairly descriptive in the Hobbit book, or was it in the song, the poem? It was either that or
Mm,
just in the literary works, where it
yeah.
describes how the trees were split and the rocks were coming down, and I
Hmm.
tried to capture a little bit of that to be true to the book, all the way down to his tail as he coils it up tighter to his body, that he loosens a couple more little stones just to add a little
Yeah.
realism, because that's all crumbling anyway because of how old they are. So I thought that would be a little touch there. But yeah, I mean, the closer you are to the camera, so to speak, the
Hmm.
more details you have to add to try to convince people. And then in the opposite way, you could do like, way in the background, you see one of the furthest waterfalls. I don't believe that's necessarily in the film, but yeah, like way in the back, like maybe half a mile, maybe a
Oh
mile or
yeah,
two. Yeah, way
back
back
here.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
And those are the fun things to add, that, let's say, a 3D sculpt can't necessarily offer as far as in a distance point of view,
Hmm.
where so I have restrictions in two dimensions, obviously, whereas something like what Weta produced, you can turn it and look around the corner and look at his physiology and how his musculature and maybe things that never showed up in the movie that you can appreciate in a 3D space, and then go back and appreciate the movie all the more because of what was explained in the sculpture. And so
Right.
that's what I love about cross pollinating 2D and 3D. And a lot of people love to pair them and yet try to make them where they stand on their own as well.
Now I'm gonna pull up, because you were also kind enough to send me some video of you, and so I just want people to see, um, because as I was putting together, if you guys saw on my social posts on Twitter and Instagram and stuff, I included a couple little clips. So this one was going to be a dead giveaway of what you were doing, so I didn't include this one in my social post.
Makes
But
sense.
here's a little bit of you working on the neck, and
It was a
it's
scab, I
kind of
think it was
crazy.
lifted
Yeah,
on.
like the little, like how
Well, and
this is mind blowing to me, by the
I
way.
would not have thought of that actually, but again, thanks to Weta and the artistry, the beautiful artistry of how they conceptualize these things. It's an old battle scar, maybe before he came
Mm,
to Erebor, that he's still bearing some of the scars of other of those worms. You know,
mm,
so little details, and even it probably doesn't show up necessarily. Um, in the actual referencing that I received from Weta, you can see dry, almost like lizard snake skin peeling off along his neck, like scales, like
yeah,
snakes and
yeah.
reptiles do. And so those kind of details, I was trying to translate and remember those details to be as accurate as I could.
Now, okay, so we got a couple questions from the chat I wanted to bring up. Higgy asks, how long does it take for a layer of paint to dry before you can go back and add the next layer? You said it goes pretty quick, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends. If you airbrush it, it's literally instantly.
Hmm.
But if you do it like what you're seeing on the screen there with a paintbrush, 5 seconds. And
Okay.
that's where oil painters, God bless them, they're beautiful, but they take a lot longer. And for example, the color white can take actually a week or more if you
Oh,
don't put
wow.
Japan dryer in it to dry. And I got my hand all over the thing, so I can't wait for that. So acrylics, you learn to work with them. People are like, oh, I can't stand acrylic because they dry too fast. And I said, that's exactly why I love them, because I can keep moving to another layer because you already know how much time you're probably going to be spending. So the sooner
Mm.
you can get each stage going, the better. But no, acrylic, if you can handle the speed, it's almost instant with airbrush and very quick with brushes. So,
Now, Dirk wants to know
hey, Dirk.
when you actually finish this piece, and he actually, it's funny because before we went live, you actually quoted the same quote, how art is never finished, it's only abandoned.
That's right.
So when did you finish this piece?
Oh, it was probably only a month ago. About a month ago.
So pretty recent, yeah.
Pretty recent. And then, of course, you have the approval process. Has to
Hmm.
go. Weta takes a look, and then from there it goes to Warner Brothers, and then their approval team, which I'm not sure if it's all internal. It may or may not be. So they have and also when you're doing art pieces that have the likeness of actors, it can take
Hmm.
longer because either the actor and or their agent has to approve their likeness. And that makes sense because you want to
Yeah,
make sure that it looks like them.
yeah,
Whereas Smaug, I didn't have that, but it still had to look like the Smaug of the film. But
yeah.
the approval
Didn't
process
have to
didn't take that long.
contact Benedict Cumberbatch for that one.
No, luckily. So yeah, good question, Dirk, though. But I was relieved to be done.
Now, you mentioned airbrushing a minute
Mhm.
ago, and we do have a little clip of you doing some airbrushing. How much airbrushing is in this piece compared
This
to
piece,
paintbrush?
well, it doesn't look like it because most people associate airbrush as really soft edges.
Hmm.
Like the old in the what is it, the 90s, people went to the mall to get their
Oh yeah, yeah.
t-shirts airbrushed. That's dating me too. But I use the airbrush in different ways to actually build texture. So I would say it's probably over 50%,
Okay,
but in ways you wouldn't quite. Well, I'm not sure if you can count that airbrush because I'll airbrush and then I'll knock it down with a real brush.
right. That's what we're seeing in this clip here is kind of you
Yeah.
wielding both at the same time.
Well, what I do there is like trees and let's say little water droplets. You can make these tiny little spatterings, these little stipplings that you can't do naturally with your hand because we always think mechanically, whether we realize it or not. Whereas the airbrush is kind of let it go where it wants to,
Hmm.
in a way, kind of a little bit of controlled chaos, but it feels more natural when you do that. So I allow the natural, gravity and whatever else goes on, depending on the viscosity of the paint, to just kind of uh, fill in those areas for the tiny little details so the water feels natural, the droplets.
Now, Andrew has a good question. As far as
Very good
hanging
question.
the canvas, he
Yep.
says, does it need to be hung away from sunlight, or are they good to be hung anywhere?
Avoid the sun. You can put the best archival coatings on it, which I do. I use archival coating, hand varnish. I do it all myself. Yet the sun in the long term will slowly start to take its toll on it. So if you're in direct sun every day, it's something you should try to avoid if you can.
Great. All right,
But
folks.
that's a great
Well,
question, though.
um, that about does it for us. I will ask a couple other questions real quick because I usually do like a lightning round with guests on the show. So,
Mm.
all right. So, lightning round of questions. Where in Middle Earth would you most like to visit?
Mm. Probably. Well, is that pre-Balrog arriving in Moria or
You
post?
can you can pick. You can pick.
Well, if it was safe, I would like to see Moria.
That's a good one.
Not safe. So probably, well, I'll still let him see it.
Favorite Middle Earth character?
Gandalf.
It's a good one. Good solid pick.
He carries so much of the burden. I admire his character of what he sacrificed to come over and help them. So yeah, Gandalf.
And finally, what is your favorite Middle Earth book?
Well, I mean, the trilogy is thought of as one book.
Yeah.
But if I had to answer it, it'd probably be Fellowship, just because I love the Moria sequence so much.
Yeah, that's great.
I guess I'm a dwarf at heart.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way, as my viewers can attest to. Well, folks, once again, the piece is Smaug the Fire Drake, in conjunction with Wētā Workshop's excellent statue. Here we are proud to have unveiled Jerry's latest masterpiece here of Smaug on the side of Erebor, wreaking havoc as he tends to do. And once again, my moderators will be kind enough to put in the link for Jerry's store. And Jerry, again, has been kind enough to give you all a discount code. So 15% off with the discount code smaugnerd. And that runs through this weekend. So that would be through Sunday, you said, right? Yes, through Sunday. So you've got a little less than a week. Get your orders in, save yourself 15% off some incredible artwork. And Jerry's got all kinds of different sizes. So whatever size wall space you're dealing with, you can find something that looks amazing and has that wonderful Peter Jackson aesthetic, but also something unique because, like we said, Jerry, he does these pieces that are inspired by Peter Jackson's movies, but then also working in a fresh angle on everything, which, again, it's an approach I absolutely love. But Jerry, thanks so much for joining us and for allowing us to be the first to see this piece.
Oh, absolutely. It's been an honor to join you, Matt, and I appreciate the work you do here on the Nerd of the Rings channel, as do all your viewers. So I'm right there with all of you guys, and thank you for watching. And I hope to do more Middle-earth inspired art and can keep up the nerdism that's in me. So appreciate you having me on, Matt.
Absolutely. Well, folks, once again, make sure you visit Jerry's store. Make sure you use that discount code smaugnerd to save yourself some money. And that'll do it for us. And until next time, maybe in the future we'll do this again and unveil some more amazing Jerry VanderStelt art. But in the meantime, we'll catch you guys this weekend for another regular video on Nerd of the Rings. We'll dive into some more lore on Saturday. And that'll do it. So we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.
Bye, everybody.